It's Mail It In Friday.
Yeah, hi, it's Bill Lumberg again. Yeah, it isn't a half day or anything like that.
This is OverDrive
It's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
All right, final hour OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. A lot of people that have big ideas for who should be the next GM of the Leafs.
Hazy,
Big ideas.
did you like that pic I sent you? Somebody sent me send it to the grappler, or whoever is back there, and just see what the reaction to that pic would be.
Okay. Yeah, I will, and we'll post it.
It shocked me. It's a Photoshop picture, and it shocked.
Yeah, it's Brendan Shanahan sitting beside an esteemed gentleman, a man of integrity and a very smart hockey mind that looks like he's actually very hungry in this picture. That
Is just
Hungry.
starving for tacos,
Please
like
put it
taco
out
hungry.
there.
Yeah.
We got to put it up on the screen.
We will.
And
We will.
You can have a reaction, Noodles. So we'll get that up on TSN too, maybe post it online. Yeah, I'd love to hear from the players. We won't because now they're gone, right?
Oh, yeah.
And who knows when we'll hear from any of them. But
What did you want to hear? What did you think you're going to hear, though? It's like, that's
Nothing
too bad.
publicly.
I liked him, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, of course. They'll be cordial.
service.
They'll be
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I'm sure they like Kyle. I don't dispute that. I think Kyle treated the players very, very well.
Handed them a boatload of money, boy.
Yeah.
They should like
Well,
him.
Why wouldn't they love him? Exactly. Look at their contractual status. He gave them everything they ever wanted. But
you know
what
what I
it
was
means
just
for the future and all that, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in a candid conversation. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Morgan, Riley, longest-standing Leaf.
Yeah. Well, you know what I was just thinking about in the break, though? Again, this is why, you laid it out, and you laid it out properly. We got one side today. Kyle Dubas hasn't spoken. But this whole timeline and how this all went down, it's not very flattering for Kyle Dubas. And that's the one thing. If I'm a team that's looking at him, there are a few teams that have vacancies. They run their businesses different. But you'd have to find, you want his side of the story, too, on how this unfolded and what his vision would be for a new organization, because he's eventually going to be a GM again in this league. When? We'll figure that out. Mm-hmm. But, if everyone's linking him to Pittsburgh, well, if I'm Pittsburgh and watching this unfold, and, what Shanny said, hey, we thought we had a deal, and then the numbers changed and all that, they're not really loving, I would imagine, how it looked, and then Kyle saying it's hard on his family and stuff. So, it wasn't optically a great look for Kyle Dubas through all of this. Maybe I'm wrong. But.
No, I mean, the way that Shanahan laid it out, it's very interesting that Shanahan decided to finally reveal information. Shanahan's been pokeroo for 2 years, man. No one's seen him. No one's heard from him. He separated himself from Dubas as well, right? That doesn't mean it was happening behind the scenes, but publicly, Shanahan really had no standing this whole season. Never saw him, never heard from him, nothing. Just kind of in the background. And now he comes out and he's got all the details of how this all played out, which I appreciate greatly. Don't get me wrong. And I think the fans will as well, him being open and honest about, because he didn't have to say, I wanted to keep him or I felt like he deserved to stay. He could have just squashed all that and said, we made a tough decision. We've moved on, not getting into details, blah, blah, blah. He broke down all the details. He showed some vulnerability, really, in terms of the whole process. And I thought he was very composed, like he always is.
Right.
And, he laid it on the line, how they got to this point. But now that it's over with, it's okay. Where do you go from here? And I'm curious. You're right, Noodles. What happens with Dubas in the future? What other jobs are available? There won't be a job like this because it's very unique, right? Because of their history, because of the losing, because of the amount of money that's available.
The money, that's the thing. The blank check, being able to do whatever you want, as far as making things go away, sign people, oversign, do all of that type of stuff. And by the way, I just saw the picture that was posted. It's not what I expected whatsoever. I was expecting Hayes, the hungry picture on day one of
This is more serious.
That is a serious picture.
That's Tommy Callahan trying to sell some brake pads somewhere in the Midwest. That's a clip-on tie.
Yeah, I love it.
He's got to keep the plant alive back in Sandusky, Ohio. That's what that is. All right, here's Darren Dreger, a TSN Hockey Insider. Dregs, we heard from Shanahan. Were you at all, surprised, taken aback by the amount of detail Shanahan supplied today and the back and forth with Dubas that dated back more than a year?
I wasn't actually, and I think it was handled the right way by the Toronto Maple Leafs, not just by Brendan Shanahan, because, look, in a market this strong, not that you're trying to drive or steer the narrative, just throw out the facts and then let us consume and analyze and pontificate as we're going to. But if you just come out and say very little and don't offer the details that Shanahan did, well, guess what? We're going to dig, and we're ultimately going to find out the truth anyway. I guess I was a bit surprised the way Shanahan, specifically went through Thursday and alluded to the fact, if not kind of bluntly stated, that they felt like they had the parameters of a deal in place prior to, and then all of a sudden the agent calls, says Kyle is in, and presents a different offer than the one that you had talked about to the point. So there were more specifics than I was expecting, but for the overall story and benefit of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Darren, I'm going to circle back on the same two kind of sentences that got my attention. It was a new financial package and then a brief conversation. Is that basically the straw that broke it? Because when you say new financial package was presented and then the conversation following that was brief, that basically means that was game over.
Yeah, that and as Shanahan talked openly about the fact that the seed of doubt was planted on Monday with Kyle Dubas' media availability. Yeah. And when he said he wasn't sure he wanted to be general manager. Now, with respect to Kyle, he was very emotional and honest in that.
Yeah. And what else about that, Darren? What else about that presser, did you find to be that might not be taken well?
Yeah, that one really jumped out to me because I it was surprising when I heard that he felt like he may need to recalibrate, right? So in that position, that's not a guy who's looking for leverage here because he doesn't like the way the contract negotiation is going. That's a guy who's saying that, look, my family is feeling the pressure of this environment. Me being the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But beyond that, I don't know that there was anything that was wild or unusual about it.
With Darren Dreger, TSN Hockey Insider, with all of this detail, courtesy of Shanahan, one-sided detail, that depending on how you look at it, could make Dubas not look so great, possibly look greedy. Maybe he wasn't principled in all this in terms of sending emails instead of face-to-face with Shanahan, all that kind of stuff, depending on, the eye of the viewer. If you were in the Dubas camp, would you suggest he get out in front of this and he needs to detail his side of things?
I would, but that's not what he's planning on doing. At least that's my understanding. I think he's going to stay in the dark for a period of time here. And it's going to be real interesting to see what Kyle Dubas does next professionally and how quick that happens. Look, there's been a lot of speculation, even when he was the general manager of the Leafs, connecting him to the Pittsburgh Penguins. There are many who think that he'd be a good fit under that Fenway group because of the way they manage and the way that they think in Pittsburgh. Well, has the environment and the situation changed dramatically? Of course it has. But the parameters of the deal that they were originally talking about to extend Dubas in Toronto, I'm told, would have put him in the upper echelon of general manager salaries. I don't know what that is. Is it $4 or $5 million per year? Yeah, that's probably in the vicinity. So what did his counteroffer look like yesterday? It must have been significant. So now he doesn't have any of that. He's unemployed. I don't think the Pittsburgh Penguins or another team in the National Hockey League are going to buck up to what his level of expectation was from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So all of a sudden this turns into a financial situation for Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, Dregs, that's kind of what I brought up before, and it was, again, we're getting one side of the story, but from what Brendan Shanahan laid out, and let's just take a look at the last week of how this unfolded or allegedly unfolded, it's not a good look for Kyle Dubas. So if I'm another team or multiple teams that could be looking at his services, does it make them have a slight pause going, hold on a second here, we don't really like how this week unfolded for him as he ended up leaving the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah, it could, Noodles. It could. I mean, it could have been a costly experience for Kyle Dubas, financially speaking here, right? Well, we'll see. Again, I think that he's earned enough respect across the National Hockey League that he will be employed somewhere in some capacity next year. But money left on the table, I guess that's up to whatever team decides that they want to bring Kyle Dubas in whatever capacity that is. I look at Pittsburgh, and we know that they've got a general manager opening, and we know that they've got a president opening. So which job does Kyle Dubas want? If he's invited into the process, it seems like they're a ways down the path with some of the candidates that they've interviewed. So it'll be interesting because, look, this has been a bizarre week from beginning to end. Again, I go back to Monday. That was surprising, if not borderline shocking, for a lot of people to watch Kyle Dubas. And then you fast forward to, today, less shocking because the Toronto Maple Leafs were forced to wait until yesterday for Dubas to declare that, okay, yeah, I'm interested. Well, the days that passed, that simply allowed Brendan Shanahan to look at the reality of the Toronto Maple Leafs situation. I think, guys, we can all agree heavy lifting is required here. And I think Dubas has been a fair negotiator as general manager. I don't think he's been a hard negotiator. And I think we can soundly say that, when he gave Austin Matthews the 5-year term, that turned the National Hockey League upside down. It did. And then Mitch Marner gets what Mitch Marner gets. And now we're looking at what's a William Nylander deal going to look like, and the core has to be broken up. So that's why Shanahan needs an experienced man to come in and do this work. It's going to be heavy lifting for the new GM coming in.
What's amazing about that is, and I wouldn't argue against it, is that is Lou Lamoriello to a T, and he pushed him aside for Dubas to do it. So is Shanahan in a way admitting that he made a massive mistake in doing that?
Yeah, I mean he's culpable. There's no question about that. I mean, you can only hire and fire so many coaches and executives before you become the number one target here. But all week, and I haven't dug around too deep on this, but all week I've been led to believe from high-ranking sources that the support from the board of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment was strong for Brendan Shanahan. It really was. But it's his responsibility to deliver a better product. And at some point, and maybe we're at that point now, the ownership of the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to say, okay, great. We had 3 home dates in round 2, but we left millions and millions and millions of dollars on the table. So we've got to correct that. And we've got to find a way to be better next year. Otherwise, for sure, those questions are going to be asked of Shanahan.
Yeah,
it's going to be spicy, man. What do you think Sheldon Keefe is thinking right now?
Well, he's got to be wondering, obviously, about his future on the bench, and I think that's fair game, right? I mean, a new general manager is going to come in, as Shanahan talked about today, and he's going to do a forensic audit of the entire hockey operations staff. Maybe there's organic change here if Spencer Carberry gets hired by somebody else. We know that he's been interviewing outside. But if a new GM comes in, which he will come in, and he's got his man available as head coach, then, of course, he's going to want to make that change. And I think that's fair game, though, guys. Don't you? I mean, why shouldn't Sheldon Keefe be held accountable? There's been so much kind of upheaval around that team, the later stages of the regular season, through the playoffs, with putting the forward lines in a blender and everything that went on. I mean, I'm not saying that Sheldon Keefe is to blame, and the reason even a little bit why the Toronto Maple Leafs aren't in this Eastern Conference final. But if you're a new general manager, you've got to consider what options you have available to you that is going to upgrade your coaching department. So I'm not predicting he's getting fired, but most definitely he's going to be scrutinized.
When is the list for the insiders to start to build out as far as potential candidates for who would Brendan Shanahan be looking at?
Yeah, well, I just mentioned it on SportsCenter. And again, we're speculating at this point. It's not like any one of us is tapped in, as Shanny on line one. Hey, by the way, are you talking to this guy, this guy, this guy? But when you look at experience, Brad Treliving has to be near the top of the heap, right? Now, there are some who rightly so go, okay, well, what did Treliving do for the Calgary Flames? And I understand that. That's fair. But, I look back to last offseason, and he turned a bad situation into what should have been a good situation in making that trade with Florida. Now, it didn't pan out the way he was hoping. He tried to correct a coaching issue, wasn't allowed to do that. He leaves, then they correct the coaching issue. So Treliving has a wealth of experience. But I think that you have to look at, and look, when you're looking at GMs only, it is a retread list, right? You're looking at Peter Chiarelli. You're looking at Mark Bergevin. Those are unlikely, but they have to be mentioned. You're looking at Ray Shero, who's got a wealth of experience. But I'm going to throw a name at you guys, and I'm not saying that he will be a candidate. I think he should be, because I know he interviewed with Philadelphia in the president's job. I'm like, why wouldn't a guy like Scott Mellenby be considered, right? I mean, He's got a ton of management experience. He's been runner-up on I don't know how many GM jobs and a couple of president's jobs. Like, this guy is hard-nosed and maybe just needs an opportunity. So I think a list would look something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to connect Shanahan's buddies of the past. That's where O maybe comes into play here, and maybe O should be included in your list because anything is possible. But at the same time, like when he went with Dubas, he had no connection to Dubas when he got here. And yet he hired him and gave him the job. He had a connection to Lou. He had a connection to Mike Babcock. But
okay, you want to play that game, Brian, and I hear you. Chris Draper has been an assistant general manager to Steve Yzerman. Well, he's worked his way up the ranks in Detroit forever, right? There's history there with Shanny, whether or not Shanny would want to bring in a buddy or whether or not Drapes, feels like he's ready to be an NHL general manager. I don't know. But to play, the game of connecting the dots here and history, then Drapes is probably a guy that could be considered as well, given management history,
right?
Obviously not GM history.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, again, I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but I do wonder if Shanahan would feel comfortable in that. Draper's a Toronto guy too. Like, obviously hasn't been here in a long time, but you never know. I mean, I guess we'll find out here, right? And like something's going to have to give in the next few weeks, right?
JFJ is available. That's all I know.
JFJ is available too. Yes, that is valid.
we said
there are options. There are options. Just an interview. That's all we're looking for.
Yeah. Just
hey, were you guys? Were you surprised Spezza resigned?
I wasn't even thinking of his standing on this, but yeah, a little bit because sure, Dubas brought him in, and Dubas was his guy. They were up in the press box. We saw that. But I don't know. Like, what does that say about Spezza and where he wants to go in the game? Like, what's he going to do next?
It's a good question. We don't know that. And, we'll have to wait and hear from Jason if we ever do. I'm sure he'll fly deep under the radar here. What I know is he was deeply connected with Kyle, right? I mean, joined at the hip is how it's described to me. And that doesn't make it a bad situation. But I think we can understand if that's the case, and I believe that was the case, why he would say, all right, well, I'm just going to take a step back. I'm going to focus on my own family, spend time with my kids, and maybe revisit an opportunity down the road in management.
Yeah, exactly. He's been in the game for a long, long time, and he's got a young family, and and yet he's set up here in Toronto. So, the idea that maybe he's following Dubas somewhere, I don't know. I guess that's I mean, what are the chances Dubas has something in his back pocket, Dregs? Like, even with all this going down, would it be shocking if by this time next week he's announced he's gone somewhere else? Because
he said he's not popping up.
Yeah, but I would say that I would suggest that can be rescinded because he can argue I wasn't the one that was told I'm not sticking around.
Exactly.
Shanahan punted me, not me.
Everything changed here, though, guys. Everything. On Monday, you're right, he said he's not popping up. He needs to recalibrate. But then he yesterday said, no, let's do this. I want to stay on as a general manager. So he got through all the family stuff and then has been let go by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was let go, even though his contract is expiring. So it wouldn't shock me even a little bit. And if I'm Dubas, I'm putting heat on the agent. I'm like, okay, hold on a sec. We went back yesterday with a mammoth offer that maybe scared the Leafs away entirely.
Darren, it's just like a player, though. You're aware of the offer going in. It's not like he would have been shocked by it or surprised. He mandated it.
Yeah. No, I get that, but that's fine. But he then had to know that the end game could be you're not getting the job and you're out of a job. And if that's the case, then the agent, of course, would have conversation. But, Dubas is still under contract, right? I mean, Pittsburgh tried to get to Brad Treliving, and the Calgary Flames wouldn't give Pittsburgh the permission to speak with him directly.
Garbage.
So,
Dregs.
I don't think Toronto will play those small-time games. But answering your question, Brian, would I be surprised? Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit.
Ooh, man. It's going to be a wild couple of weeks. It's already been a wild week here in Toronto. Two of the most famous press conferences I can think of. The Dubas one on Monday, Shanahan today. And you're going to be a new GM, possibly a new coach, maybe some new players. We know there's going to be turnover on the bench. So it's all going to happen in the next couple of months. All right, Dregs, we'll leave it there. Thank you for this.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Darren Dreger, our TSN Hockey Insider.
Ooh, well, there's been lots of moves out here, but you know what? Like, we got to let it breathe. Like, I'm glad. What are you guys glad about as far as the timing of this? Because what if Brendan decided to wait till 6:57 or till tomorrow or something? Like, now you've got to, at least they got it done before the long weekend, right? Now he's got work to do, though.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, it's pretty wild that he drove to his office this morning. Dubas was in there working, and there's Shanahan driving in. I mean, it's been a wild week. It definitely has been a wild week. All right, we've got the Shanahan audio. We'll play some more of it. I think a lot of people probably missed it earlier. It's quite something. It was quite something.
And it's not that long. We'll play it in an entirety.
Okay.
Next.
We'll get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. There you go. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.
The 2023 Men's IIHF World Hockey Championships are on TSN 1050.
Canada has done it!
Saturday morning, Canada, Switzerland. Coverage begins at 9 on TSN 1050. Champions live here. Now, back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Let's get down to business.
All right, our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. As we know, Melon and Fridays are brought to you by Boston Pizza's new playoff menu developed using Fanalytics. BP's run the numbers to craft the perfect playoff menu, which includes our winged ribs, the new league leader in wings above replacement. Visit BP for puck drop tonight. All right, I don't recall the last time we played a press conference, but I don't recall the last time there was a presser to the extent of the Shanahan one earlier today. We haven't seen or heard from Shanahan in a long time. News came out earlier today. Dubas is out. They're moving on for Kyle, and Brendan Shanahan got up to the podium, and man, the detail of how this all happened is a rarity, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all the detail and all the honesty. So we figured, new audience, a lot of people probably missed it. We'll run it. We'll come back, respond to it. This was Brendan Shanahan, the president of the Maple Leafs, earlier this afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. First off, I apologize for conducting this on a Friday at at 3 o'clock in front of a long weekend. Before I get started on a bit of a timeline here and questions, I thought it was really important to, at this point, say as well, I want to thank Kyle Dubas for the 9 years that he has given to this hockey organization and all the tremendous contributions that he has made to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been a fantastic employee and a fantastic person the entire time. Timeline on the Kyle Dubas contract. I suppose you could go back to last offseason. I approached Kyle in his office at the Ford Performance Center and explained to him that he would be not receiving a contract offer prior to his final year of his contract. I tried to reassure him that it wasn't a reflection on his future with the club. I reminded him that it was a situation I found myself in a few years prior as well, and that it was my hope and it was my intention that at the end of the year and after being judged for the full 5 years of his contract, that we would be extending him and moving forward. Kyle took it very well. I thought he was a pro. He addressed that in his opening season statements, that he was comfortable with that, and I thought that he had done an excellent job. I thought Kyle had a great offseason. We had some difficult choices to make. If you're judging him on the work he did last summer, some of the decisions of letting players go, of signing some players, I think it's a challenging job for any general manager, and I think Kyle did an excellent job. We came into the season very well organized, many options. I thought the team, typical season of highs and lows, but had an excellent regular season. Going throughout the year, the way that the team was managed, I had no issue with that. As a matter of fact, I thought that, again, Kyle did an excellent job. The trade deadline, again, going back to his process and the way that our team does this here under his leadership, there's a lot of input, and I thought that he made some very good moves. And I thought he had prepared the team to the best of his ability, as any GM can do after the trade deadline. There's not as much for a GM to do. So it was important for me shortly after the trade deadline, around the middle of March, I approached Kyle in his office at Ford Performance Center and told him that I had seen enough in my mind that I had wanted him to be our general manager going forward, but that he should go home and take some time to think about it. And if he was comfortable with that idea, I would start talking to ownership about that. Kyle appreciated that. We had a good relationship the whole year. That day was nothing different. He came back to me about a week later and said yes, that he was comfortable moving forward, and he gave me the name of his agent, or he said his agent would reach out to me, but that he didn't want this to be a distraction for him, and I respected his wishes, that I wasn't going to discuss it with him any further at that point. So fast forward to the end of the season, getting through the end of the regular season, the playoffs. I had many good conversations with Kyle's agent, felt we were making progress. I wanted to be in a position to respect Kyle's wishes and not discuss this with him as it was going along. But I knew his agent from time to time was giving him updates. That's really up to them. I don't know exactly what was going on there. But I felt those conversations, which were productive, had put me in a position that when the season ended, or even if it was between rounds, because at a certain point I felt however round 2 ended, even if we were moving on to round 3, that this was something that needed attention now. And I felt that those conversations and the communications I got from Kyle had put me in a position where I could come to him with something that was pretty much a finished deal, that reflected what he wanted financially and what he wanted as a general manager, what was important to him. When the season did end, unfortunately, abruptly, it was very important to me that I was ready to go early. I expressed to Kyle that night that, as disappointed as we all were, I thought he had done a good job. It's a tough time for the players. It's a tough time for management. It's a tough time for all of us. It's a tough time for Maple Leaf fans in those moments after a loss. But we had a day off on Saturday. We communicated a little bit through text on Sunday. We had a team photo here. We went up to my office. I had another good conversation with Kyle. I presented him with what I thought was a framework that reflected what his agent and I had talked to, and a good finishing place in the effort to get this done as soon as possible. And Kyle took it. He seemed fine, or he seemed pleased to receive that news so quickly. We then talked about the hockey team for another couple of hours, and we went home. And we knew the next day we were having exit physicals and media. We talked a little bit about doing media. I had expressed to him that it was not my intention to talk to the media until I had something settled with him. I expressed that I thought it was maybe a good idea if he didn't either, but Kyle said he really wanted to talk to the media, and I respected that. He felt that his players were speaking, his coach was speaking, and that he should as well, and I respected his wishes. So the next day when, and let me go back, I would also say part of our conversation in my office was that this was hard on his family. In fairness, we talked about that, how, quite frankly, it's hard on all our families. It's a difficult thing. It's hard on the players, the parents, but it's the job we choose. It's the sport we choose. We're very fortunate to be in it, but it does not come without a toll on the families. I completely acknowledge that, and we talked a little bit about that. The next day, though, I would say while watching Kyle's press, I think at that point there was a shift in my thinking at that moment, a dramatical shift in my thinking as I drove home that night, that, as Kyle expressed, he might not want to be our GM, and I have to take that very seriously. As I had said to him the day before, I understood those feelings and the pressure that players are under, the pressure that management, coaches, family members are under. But it was a very real possibility for me at that point that I would be needing to look somewhere else. And as part of my job, that is what I began to do, while still hoping that Kyle and I could come to some sort of a resolution. What I would say then was, in the next few days, I didn't get any more clarity. Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Kyle and I did not meet privately. On Wednesday, we did meet privately, and we discussed this again for a long time. I had probably more questions than answers, and I did not have clarity. It further made me feel that there's a strong possibility that rightfully anyone's right to do so, he might not want to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So my focus then again continued toward the path of what do we look like next year with a different general manager. To Thursday, the next day, Kyle had said that his agent was going to call me and that he would reach out to me as well. I got a call in the afternoon from his agent, and basically a new financial package was presented to me by the agent. The conversation was brief. I did not hear from Kyle throughout the day, and I went home, and just before dinner time I got an email from Kyle saying that he did want to be the general manager of the Maple Leafs. At that point, I have to, if I'm being honest, I had gotten to a different place about how I felt about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs and what was best. And as hard as it was, and as hard as it is to make a significant change to somebody that you're close to and that you've been working with for 9 years, I even though I was presented with, well, a gap had risen within the contract status, and but nevertheless, the email that I received from Kyle, I just felt differently, and I felt that the long-term future of the Maple Leafs might have to change, and slept on that, and woke up this morning, drove to Kyle's office at Ford Performance Center, and informed him that we were not going to be renewing his contract. And that's where we are here today. Obviously, there will be questions, and I'm happy to do my best and answer the ones that I can. My focus now, after I'm done with this, is immediately to begin the pursuit of interviewing candidates for being the next general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
So, Brendan, just to follow what you've said there, do you think, from your side of things, that this broke down entirely over money?
No, I wouldn't characterize it as breaking down over money. I think, like I said, I think knowing and recognizing Monday after the availability that when a general manager is playing out the last year of his contract, there's always the possibility of a contingency that you might need a new general manager. He might choose to go to another team. And I think that I felt I had gotten a little bit closer and felt some indications that we were going to work this out. I would say after the press conference on Monday, I was less sure. And I thought there is a real possibility that he might not want to do this, and that he might need to, I think, as he said, take a step back. At that point, I hadn't ruled Kyle Dubas out, but I certainly had to make sure that I was thinking of other options as well.
Brendan, you said at one point you realized the future of the Maple Leafs have to change in reference to moving on from Kyle. Does that mean you look for a different kind of general manager, like a person with a different kind of vision for the team? Or what are you looking for in your next guy?
Well, what I would say is that I'm going to be open-minded to who that person can be. I want to be open-minded to all candidates. Certainly having an experienced general manager would be an attractive quality.
How much of this decision was yours alone versus getting input from the board and ownership on letting Kyle go?
Well, I think in any organization, and ours is no different, on decisions as big as this, it is something that you communicate with your bosses. But this was ultimately my decision. They were supportive, but ultimately that is my job, and it is my job to make recommendations to them, and that was my recommendation and decision.
Josh. Kyle had, you said you could have maybe signed him last summer. What's the level of regret now that didn't get done, and having a lame duck general manager, for lack of a better term, for the whole year, and what that strain might have also meant?
I think it's more common than people realize. I think that players go through it, management goes through it, coaches go through it, and it's not ideal, certainly. But I thought that's why it was very important to be very communicative with Kyle throughout the year, try to be as supportive as I could throughout the year, and also go to him as soon as I thought that it was fair to go to him that after the trade deadline and say that if you're comfortable doing this and take your time to find out if you are, I want to start going to work on getting this done. So that was not something that would be on his mind going into the playoffs, that I felt he had put the team in a position to have success. So it was important to me to not just wait and see what the result was, but to be consistent, not with just the support I try to give him on a daily basis, but also have something tangible presented to him in the form of a verbal commitment by me and then subsequent conversations with his agent that went well.
So Brandon, just to be clear, on Monday then, when Kyle said to us they left the door open to not returning next season as Leafs GM, that was news to you, more or less, that could be a possibility?
I think we had discussed that certainly it was a concern, not just for Kyle, but just but we're speaking about Kyle specifically. I think we discussed the day before that it was a concern for him. I didn't expect that he was going to go out and put that to the public, but nevertheless, it made it all more real and all more serious, certainly. It presented certainly lots of questions. I have no issue with Kyle's honesty, Kyle's emotions. I think Kyle is an honest person. Like I said, I've been in this game a long time. We have all had these experiences where we see, whether it's as a player or in management, how this can impact your children at school or your family. So I want to be very empathetic and understanding and know and understand that's a very real thing, not just in Toronto and not just in the sport of hockey, but really everywhere. I do think it's a massive privilege to be able to play or work in the National Hockey League. But that's not to underscore that it is difficult for all athletes in all cities and management as well.
There you go. Brendan Shanahan, the president of the Leafs. Forgot to put my jacket back on. I just realized. Amateur hour. But, hey, listen, it's Mail-In Friday. What are you going to do? We're going into a long weekend here, right? Mail-In Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza's new playoff menu, developed using Fanalytics. BP's run the numbers to craft the perfect playoff menu, which includes our winged ribs, the new league leader in wings above replacement. Visit BP for puck drop tonight. We'll come back and put a bow on what we just heard. The week that was here in Toronto, what could be at stake in the future here? Jays in action tonight. Game 2 of the Eastern Final in the NBA. Game 1 of the Western Final in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to be a wild weekend. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2.
The 2023 Men's IIHF World Hockey Championships are on TSN 1050.
Canada has done it!
Saturday morning, Canada, Switzerland. Coverage begins at 9 on TSN 1050. Champions live here. Now, back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Take my breath!
All right, today's Best Bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Looking at Game 2 of the East. We get 9.5 with Miami. I think Boston wins tonight, but that's a massive spread. 9.5? I think Miami shows up. I think Jimmy Butler probably shows up again. I think it's a close game. I will take the points, and I'm going Jason Tatum over 29.5 points tonight.
Can I have a side bet with you?
Sure.
What do you got?
500 Celtics cover.
You think the Boston Celtics dummy Miami tonight?
No. I don't think. I know.
Okay, I'll take it.
Ooh.
Yeah, I love Miami tonight. I'll take the points. Give me 9.5. There you go. Go ahead. I'll take it. Jason Tatum goes off for 30-plus tonight, too. I'll take that. Today's Best Bets powered by FanDuel. Bet your favorite NBA superstars from first basket score to top point score on FanDuel this postseason. Please play responsibly. Must be 19-plus and physically located in Ontario. So let me quickly update the leaderboard at the PGA. Where's our boy Corey Connors at?
Corey Connors minus
Better be leading. Better be lead.
He's tied in the lead with Scotty Scheffler, so he's going out there with Scheffler tomorrow.
He's done 18-hole second round.
Yes,
Dunzo.
He's through. He and Scheffler both shot 2 under today. They're both 5 under for the tournament. They are both in the clubhouse with the lead. I told
you Scotty Scheffler's going to rear his ugly head.
Yeah. You know what's wild is Victor Hovland is 4 under, but DeChambeau was starting to fall off. He got it back on the rails. He's 4 under. Brooks Koepka was 4 under today. He's 2 under for the tournament. Koepka is back in the hunt.
Out. PGA tough course. Watch out.
Yep. So you got Scheffler, you got Connors, Hovland, DeChambeau, Koepka.
Nice.
You got some other Canadian content in there. Pendrith, Svensson, Roy McIlroy's even par for the tournament. He's still lurking.
Yeah, don't ever count him out.
No, you can't. You can't. So there you go. All right, take it for what it's worth. We're going to have a great weekend. PGA Championship, Jays, Orioles in town. You got the Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA playoffs continuing. It's going to be awesome. So thanks to everyone behind the scenes today. We appreciate all the help, getting us on the air, getting us up, doing our thing. Everyone for tuning in, radio, TV, podcast, and web. We appreciate that as well. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy your long weekends. We're back Tuesday at...
If I have an interview, I might not be back forever. 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.